The Gemara yesterday, we basically discussed at length the concept of what chinuch really is, and one of the ways of learning our Gemara was that the Gemara itself was questioning what is the criteria of chinuch and what is the obligation of chinuch, and the way we explained it based on a interpretation of Reb Moshe Feinstein, very interestingly, how he connects it to two other areas in Jewish law. One of them is brought in Shulchan Aruch, and that is the law of lulav and esrog, and then we applied it as well to the laws of education, co-ed schooling, and the way the Gemara was seemed to be questioning what chinuch is. The two options were either chinuch is all about the education of what it's going to be like when the person gets older, in other words, preparing the child for when he gets older, or the chinuch is that we don't take so much into consideration the concept of education, but rather just the general idea, and say, listen, you got to do the mitzvah because when you're an adult, you're going to need to do this mitzvah. So we look more at the mitzvah and say, you have an obligation in the mitzvah. And instead of looking at the concept of, are you being educated by doing it this way, or are you being educated by doing it that way, we look more at the actual mitzvah. You're obligated in this mitzvah, fulfill it. And that's what chinuch is. We drop the mitzvah on the child, say, now you're obligated. The other way of looking at it was that we concentrate on, is this really a mitzvah of chinuch by, are we educating the child properly by doing things this way? Is this effective? Is this going to be effective? We have to think about it. Is this going to be effective for when the child gets older? So those two ways, and the Gemara's conclusion was that, before I go to the conclusion, the Gemara's practical application that our Gemara was dealing with this question was someone who's blind, a child who's blind, or a child who's lame. And a child who's lame would be, according to the Beis Shammai view, that he might be, there was a thought that maybe he's obligated. And a child who's blind, there's a thought that would be obligated according to all opinions. And the reason why there might be an obligation is because since they are sick with a sickness that's healable, and we're dealing with someone who's blind, that's going to get better, someone who's lame is going to get better. So there is room to say that the educational obligation should apply to them. They should be obligated to prepare for when they get older, when they get healed and get older. And the conclusion of the Gemara is, no, we're not going to obligate them, because if they would be an adult at this stage, they would be exempt. So therefore, we're not going to say that they're obligated, even though logically you might think, well, education, we should educate them. The conclusion is, the Gemara, that no, there wouldn't be an obligation. So a child who's blind is going to be exempt, even though he's going to get better. And then we come to the next Gemara. And the next Gemara talks about the laws of the sacrifices that were brought in the temple during the holidays. So when people would come to the holiday, to the temple, they would bring certain sacrifices, and certain obligatory sacrifices. What were the obligatory sacrifices? Well, one was the re'iyah, and the other was the chagiga. So there's the obligation to bring a korban re'iyah, and there's an obligation to bring a Karban Chagiga. And the Mishnah had a debate how valuable, what is the amount of money that they must be worth. In other words, can you bring a very inexpensive sacrifice, or would you need to bring a sacrifice? Can you bring a very cheap sacrifice, or what how much does it need to cost? So there was an argument, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai said that the Re'iyah is more expensive than the Chagiga, has to be worth double, and the Chagiga to be worth half. The Beis Hillel says the opposite, that the Chagiga has to be worth double, and the Re'iyah could be worth half. Now, what are the difference between these two sacrifices? So the Karban Re'iyah, which is meant that you do not come here empty-handed, that's the Re'iyah. The Re'iyah one is all about not coming to God empty-handed. And that sacrifice was basically a sacrifice that was totally burnt burnt on the altar, and that's not coming empty-handed to Hashem, is basically bringing a sacrifice that God is going to enjoy. No one else gets a part of that, at least the meat part. No one gets maybe the skin, the carbonite with skin, but the actual sacrifice was not eaten by anyone. Only it was all burnt, totally burnt. Now the Karban Shlamim was different. Karban Shlamim is a peace offering, and the reason why it's called a peace offering is because it's peace to everyone. Hashem, there's a certain portion that gets burned in the altar. There's the Bailim, the owners get some. There's the Koyanim get some of it. So it's a peaceful. It brings peace to everyone. So that's the Karban Chagiga. Of course, it's a celebration sacrifice, a celebrity. It's a sacrifice for the celebration for the holiday Chagiga. But it's called a shlamim. So these are the two sacrifices that we're dealing with. Now the Gemara here is going to go back and forth between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding what is the reason for this, for their argument. Why do they think that rabbinically, this should be more valuable, and that one would be less important or less significant, or less it wouldn't be as need as much, you wouldn't have to spend as much money on the other one. So
there's
so the Gemara here, we're going to start again from the Tano, from the two dots. Beis Shammai Yoimrim Hari'iyah Shtei Kesef. So we're by the two dots. We're right in the middle of the page, really. Maybe a little closer to the top. Maybe about 20 lines. Let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe 23, 24 lines from the top. So we're starting this this new piece of the explaining the Mishnah. This new piece of the Mishnah that spoke about how expensive does the sacrifice need to be. Beis Shammai oimrim hari'iyah shtei kesef. Beis Shammai said that the burnt offering, that's called the re'iyah, not to see God empty-handed, it has to be worth 2 silver coins called mais, 2 mais kesef. Tano Rabbanan, the rabbis learned. Beis Shammai yoimrim, Beis Shammai says hari'iyah shtei kesef, v'chagiga ma kesef. Shammai says that the re'iyah has to be worth 2 silver coins, and the chagiga has to be worth 1 silver coin. Why? Because the Karban re'iyah, the sacrifice called re'iyah, is much more significant. Why is it significant? It's totally burnt to God. Was that a much more important sacrifice? So that would be a reason to that it should be worth more. And another reason, he says the first reason was Shari'iyah Oila Kula Lagavaya, Masha Enkin B'Chagiga, which is not that way by the Chagiga. So the Re'iyah is totally burnt, and that's not so by the Chagiga, the carbon, the peace offering. The peace offering is not totally burnt. We said it's peaceful, meaning everyone gets a little portion of that. Everyone gets a portion of that sacrifice, so it wasn't all burnt. And that's one reason why the Re'iyah should be worth more. The other reason is we find by Shavuos that there is more sacrifices that are oilos than shlamim by the sacrifices of the holiday of Shavuos. So we find that there was more of the oilos. Now, the commentaries asked, the other holidays also had oilos and didn't have shlamim. So why do we bring a proof from? Why do we bring a proof from the holiday of Shavuos? We should bring a proof from other holidays that they only have oilos, they only have burnt offerings, they don't have shlamim. But that doesn't seem to be enough of a proof. It's more of a proof if you have more oilos than shlamim, so that proves more that this is more important. If you just have oilos and you don't have shlamim, that just means that it's not applicable then, or it's not part of that. It's not part of that category. That it's, in other words, it's not necessary for them. But the fact that you would have it, and here you have more, that means that it's more significant. Yes.
Quick question. Atzeres is referring to Shavuos.
Yeah.
So how do they refer to Shemini Atzeres?
In the Gemara, Shemini Atzeres is it's called Yom Tov Achron Shel Chag. That's generally the way it's referred to it. Or it might say, Shemini Atzeres as well. But but Atzeres is often used for Shavuos. We find as well other places. I don't know if you remember, but we spoke about Achitophel had said that before he committed suicide in the book of Shmuel Beis, he said, if you find Atzeres, if you find the weather good, plant wheat. And we had a whole explanation of what that meant. But anyway, he used the term Atzeres, and Atzeres meant Shavuos. So yeah, that's the common term for Shavuos. Before I forget, also, David, I did upload about 30 classes last night. So hopefully you had requested to try to get back in order. So we tried to put up a lot of them.
Great, thank you.
You saw, So okay, so the Gemara continues here and says, so we have two reasons for Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says, that the Re'iyah is less, it's 1 silver ma, and the Chagiga, the peace offering, is worth more. It's 2. It has to be worth at least 2 silver ma'as, which basically is the minimum. It's not telling us the maximum, it's telling us the minimum obligation. Now, Chagiga yeshna lefnei hadibur, and his reason is, why is Chagiga more important? So he says we have Chagiga before lefnei hadibur. There is Chagiga before we actually got the revelation at Sinai. We brought this sacrifice called a Chagiga. It's basically based on the verse V'yachoigu li bamidbar, that when the Jewish people had asked Pharaoh, when Moses had asked Pharaoh that let the Jewish people go and bring sacrifices to God, he used the term Chagiga. And so this is the sacrifices that we're referring to before we had the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. They brought a sacrifice or some sacrifices, and the sacrifices were Chagiga. At least that's the way Beis Hillel is explaining it now. We'll soon see. It does say oilos there also. It does say also there that they brought burnt offerings, which we'll have to soon see how that fits with Beis Hillel. But Beis Hillel emphasizes that they brought their Chagigas, and therefore you had Chagiga before the revelation at Sinai, and you did not have, according to the way he's explaining it, you did not have Re'iyah, Masha Ein Kain Ve'Re'iyah, which is not so with the Oilas Re'iyah. You did not have the burnt offering Re'iyah there at Mount Sinai before the giving of the Torah. So V'yoid, and then he says another point, Matzinu b'nesiyim sheriba behen hakasuv b'shlamim yoser mi'ba'olos. We find by the sacrifices of the leaders, the Nesiyim, that they included more shlamim than oilos, and we explained that because if you count up well, at least the way Rashi does it, Rashi adds up all of the sacrifices, and he says, each day in the beginning of the month of Nisan, when they inaugurated the tabernacle, so it was inaugurated for 7 days, Shivas Yemei Hamanuim. Those were the 7 days leading right up to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And Vayihi Bayom Hashmini, and it says on the 8th day, that's when the and Aaron inaugurated it and put it up complete. It stayed as it was meant to stay, and it didn't. The the revelation of God finally manifested itself on the 8th day. The 8th day was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So for the 7 days before that, they were putting it up and taking it down, and finally on the 8th day, there was a great revelation, and they put up the tabernacle, and each the leaders, they said, you know what, let's donate to the tabernacle first. So they quickly they offered sacrifices. So God told Moses, he said, let them bring their sacrifices each on a different day. And so interestingly enough, when you read the Torah, you're very repetitive in that portion, because it just repeats the same exact set. They all brought the same thing, but God said, have them each bring it on a separate day. So we read that whole, this is what the first Nasi, the first leader brought, and then it goes and repeats the whole exact same amount of sacrifices for the second one on the second day. And then on the third day, it talks about the third one, and it's all the same, but it basically divides it up into different days. It's brought in Kabbalistic Sfarim that each one was drawing down a different. There was really a difference between the sacrifices, even not physically, they all looked the same, but spiritually they were drawing down different revelations, and therefore each one had to be on a different day. So from the beginning of Nisan until the 12th of Nisan, they all brought, until and including the 12th of Nisan, they brought these sacrifices called the Nesiyim brought the sacrifice. Now, what did they bring? So what they brought for these sacrifices was majority was the majority was shlamim, and the minority of them was oilos. Now, I had mentioned, right, if you remember the wording of those reading of the Torah reading, so it says par echad ayel echad keves echad, that they would bring la'olah. For an olah they brought one par, one ayel, one keves. A par is a ox, ayel a ram, keves a sheep. That was for the Oila. Each one brought that. And then they brought Ulazevach HaShlamim Bakar Shnayim. And for the Shlamim, for the peace offering, they brought cattle, 2 cattle. Elim Chamisha, Tudim Chamisha, Kvasam Neshana Chamisha. They brought 17 Shlamim. So they brought 2 Oilas and 17 Shlamim. Mordechai, I don't know what's going on with your computer, but it's like flashing back and forth. You know what's is there maybe a button is pressed or something? Mordechai, are you? Anyway, something's wrong with your video. Okay. So the fact is that there was more shlamim than oilas. So Beis Hillel says, you see over there that oilas carry like a maybe more significant role, and they should cost more. We should charge. There should be a more expensive. They should be a more expensive sacrifice. So the Gemara says, Beis Hillel my timra loy amri ke Beis Shammai. What's the reason that Beis Hillel doesn't say like Beis Shammai? What does that mean? Because Beis Shammai seems to have at least a decent logic. Maybe Beis Hillel should agree with Beis Shammai, and even if they don't want to say that the oilas should be more than the shlamim, but make them both equal. In other words, Beis Shammai had a good claim. Maybe Beis Hillel has a good claim as well. But what about Beis Shammai's claim? Beis Shammai has a very valid claim. So maybe don't minimize the importance of the oilas. On the one hand, it's kula legavai, it all goes to Hashem. And also, what about the fact that on Shavuos, you see that there's more oilas than shlamim? So the Gemara says that the ka'amrit re'iyah difa, the oila kula legavaya, this that you said that the oila is more adif, it's better because it's kula legavaya, it all goes to Hashem. Adirabba, on the contrary, the opposite. Chagiga adifa. Chagiga is better. The isbei shtei achilos. It has 2 eatings. 2 eatings, meaning it's eaten by, so to speak, by Hashem, the altar, and it's eaten by humans, the koyanim and the owners. So there is a value to that. The fact that it has 2 consumptions does carry with it a certain significance. Now, it doesn't mean that the oila isn't holier. What it means is that there is a uniqueness to the shlamim that the oila doesn't have. Now, the Gemara says, "Udika amrit neilach me'atzeres." In this, that you want us to compare the sacrifices that an individual brings when he goes to the Beis Hamikdash for the holiday. You want to compare. You want to see what you want to compare what he does and learn from the sacrifice of Shavuos. The problem is the Shavuos sacrifice is a communal sacrifice. The holidays the holiday sacrifices that we are talking about are personal sacrifices that each individual had to bring. You brought your carbon re'iyah, you brought your personal carbon chagiga. We're talking about personal sacrifices. So we can't learn personal sacrifices from what we find with communal sacrifices. Done in Karban Yachid, the Karban Yachid, we learn, we can be logically deduce from a carbon yachid, a personal sacrifice from a personal sacrifice. V'yein danin, we cannot logically deduce carbon yachid mi carbon tzibur, a personal sacrifice from a communal sacrifice, which is the Shavuos offering that we were trying to learn from. Beis Shammai was trying to use as a source. That's a communal sacrifice. That's not something that each individual brought. That was brought as a communal sacrifice, and therefore it's not considered a good enough source for the carbon re'iyah and carbon chagiga that we are talking about. So that is how Beis Hillel will answer the proofs of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, my time lo yomri ke Beis Hillel. So why doesn't Beis Shammai hold like Beis Hillel? So Beis Hillel also had some good logic, and so we want to know what is Beis Shammai's reason for not following the reasoning of Beis Hillel. So the answer is the Ka'amrit, this that you said, Chagiga Adifa, the Yeshna Lefnei Hadibur, that Chagiga has a uniqueness. It's better because it was there before the revelation, the speech at Sinai, where God said the 10 Commandments that we see that there were Chagigas there. Re'iyah nami Yeshna Lefnei Hadibur. There was also Re'iyah, there was also carbon oilas, burnt offerings as well. So you want to tell me because then, you found these peace offerings, there were also burnt offerings there as well. And so you had Re'iyah also before you had the revelation.
Rabbi?
What does this mean? So we're going to do Rashi here. Yes, Ezra.
So the Re'iyah is when Moshe went to Paro and said the entire nation has to show up in the desert to sacrifice to Hashem. So that's the Re'iyah that he's talking about?
No. That is part of it, because when he said that, it was true. They are going to be sacrificing. But what sacrifice did they do when they left Egypt? They went to Mount Sinai, and there were sacrifices that they brought. And what were the sacrifices? So if we take out a Chumash, Shemais here, and in Parshas Mishpatim, it continues talking about the revelation that happened at Sinai at the end of Mishpatim. The main revelation is in Parshas, but the end of Mishpatim, it then repeats. It goes back over that story, part of it, and it mentions that in chapter 24, verse 5. So it says, "Vayishlach es narei b'nei Yisrael," and he sent the young ones of the Bnei Yisrael, Vayalu oilos, and they brought burnt offerings, Vayizbachu zvachim shlamim, and they brought sacrificial peace offerings, and La Hashem, to Hashem, parim, bulls. So, interestingly enough, Beis Hillel wants to prove from here that the shlamim are more significant, because we find that before the actual revelation at Sinai, they actually brought peace offerings. What do you mean? The verse itself says they also brought burnt offerings, vayalu oilos, vayizbachu zvachim shlamim. And this is what Beis Shammai says. What are you telling me? They didn't bring oilos. They only brought peace offerings. The verse is pretty clear. And this is Parshas Mishpatim. It goes back that after it finishes all the monetary laws and all that, So it goes back to what happened leading up to the revelation at Sinai. And it over there mentions that Hashem said to Moshe that you, Aaron, Nadab, and Avi, and the 70 elders, you'll bow from afar. And then it says Moshe alone will draw near, and the others cannot come close. Hein lo yigashu, ve'am lo yalu imai. The people cannot come with him. And then it says, and Moshe came and he told the Bnei Yisrael all the words of Hashem about the boundary on the mountain that they should come, and also that Ve'ez kol mishpatim, all the laws. They also that they should with spouses for beforehand, so that the law be in the no, and few more that were given in Mara, and then Moshe wrote down all the words of Hashem, and verse 4, and he wrote down all the words of Hashem on a scroll, and which is basically from creation. Rashi says from Bereshis until Matan Torah, and he also wrote down the mitzvahs that were given in Mara, and then he got up on the 5th day of Sivan, and he built the altar. Right, it's verse 4, verse Daled. Pasuk Daled, Vayiven Mizbeach Tachazar Ushtem Esrei Matseva. He put 12 like monuments for the 12 tribes, and then verse 5 is what I quoted, that he sent the young men to bring these offerings, which included these oilais and these shlamim. And Rashi says that the young man means the b'chayres, firstborn. So maybe not necessarily were they young; they were firstborns. It calls them narim, calls them the young ones, but it refers to the b'chayres. Now, so the verse basically is talking about these sacrifices, which, as you said, Ezra, was basically what Moshe was telling Pharaoh, that he wants to. That the Jews, we want to celebrate with God. We're going to be bringing sacrifices. So it would seem that this is what he was referring to. Now, so the problem is that we have a little problem with Rashi, with Beis Hillel, that Beis Shammai seems to have a good claim. Beis Shammai seems to have a good claim that there's oilais and shlam. So let's first do Rashi. Rashi over here. Yeshna Lefnei Hadibor on page 6a. It's really like right in the middle of the page in Rashi, and Rashi is in the inside of the right side of the Gemara, and says Yeshna Lefnei Hadibor Koidem Matan Torah Hikrivu Shlamim the Sinai. Before Matan Torah, they brought peace offerings. The Chsiv, as it says, by Yishlachas Nari Bnei Yisrael, he sent the youth of the Bnei Yisrael, and it refers to the B'chayrim, V'yavagav da'hai siv v've'ela mishpatim. And even though this pasuk, it sounds like it's after the giving of the Torah, because it's in Mishpatim, which is after Yisrael. With Yisrael, it talks about the revelation at Sinai and the 10 Commandments. So even though it seems like it's later, it really was before the 10 Commandments, as I showed you from the previous verses, is on the 5th day of the of Sivan. And the giving of the Torah was not till afterwards. And so, and Rashi says, there is no such thing as an order in Torah. Just because one thing it says later doesn't necessarily happen later. Shabbos, and this we learned in Tractate Shabbos, Rabbi Akiva, in the chapter called Rabbi Akiva. There's a chapter in Shabbos called Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi B'Sheni Olav Yer B'Shlishi. Rabbi Yossi explains that how did it work? The second day Moshe went up, Shlishi Yarad came down. Shlishi Olav Yarad. Third day went up and came down. Rabbi Yarad, and the fourth day he came down with Shuvlai Allah, and he didn't go back up. B'chamishi Bana Mizbeach. So then he built the altar on the 5th day. v'hikreval of korban b'shishi, and on the sixth day he brought sacrifices. V'hikreval of korban. I'm sorry, and he brought a sacrifice. B'shishi nitna Torah, and he says here b'shishi. He was the day that the Torah was given. I just have a note here on the side. Let's see where that goes to. And so the Torah was given on the sixth day. So we don't find such an altar that there was an altar built only by the giving of the Torah, and this verse by Yishlach Yisrael. Later on, the Gemara will ask that there were also oilais over there, and so what is Beis Hillel talking about when they say that there was peace offerings there and there weren't burnt offerings? The puzzle clearly says. Now, the note on the side that I told you in my Rashi has a little note on the side. So there's another way to read Rashi. And the other way to read Rashi is that he brought the sacrifices on the fifth day. B'shishi loy haya loy pnai. On the sixth day, he didn't have time. And on the va'achar kach b'Shabbos nitna the Torah. And afterwards, on Shabbos, the Torah was given. And so that's the common understanding, that the Torah was actually given on Shabbos. That's one of the reasons that they say why we don't have fleishiks on Shavuos. So we have milchiks, commemorating that the Torah was given on Shabbos, and on Shabbos they weren't able to slaughter and cook, slaughter and cook, and so on. So the only thing that they would have had, that they could have had, was dairy. So that's the.
What does it mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean that he didn't have time?
They didn't know how. They didn't know how to do shechita. They only heard that you have to do shechita.
Yeah, but the rabbi said that it says that they didn't have time, not that they didn't know how.
I guess to learn.
So it's a Gemara in Shabbos, that they were too busy Erev Shabbos. It was a Friday. So
Okay.
somehow it was busy. Now the question is what that meant exactly. What were they preparing for? Friday, I don't know, cleaning their tents or whatever. I don't know. I have to look up exactly what the Gemara means. But that's the term. That on Friday they didn't have time, and Shabbos is when Shabbos is when Hashem gave the Torah.
It sounds strange, like Hashem asks you to do something. You say, "Gee, I don't have time to do it. I'll do it tomorrow."
Well, no, it's Hashem basically gave the Torah. It wasn't as their actions. I mean, it does say Moshe Hosef Yom Midilei. Moshe added a day on his own. So that is a discussion on Shabbos and the holiday of Shavuos. Like, what does that mean? He was Mosef. He added a day of his own. But if you want, we'll take a look after. Maybe I'll bring it up tomorrow. If you'd like, I'll check it up exactly what it says over there. Yes, Yehuda.
Could it be that they didn't have
proper
could
what?
it be that they didn't have could it be that they didn't have time to shech the animal?
So the problem with the shechting is that we didn't have the laws of shechting
And they
until
didn't have time to learn them.
until Shabbos. And so we didn't have time from when we got the laws to actually shecht. There was no time to shecht. It was Shabbos. We got the
Isn't that
Torah
the answer?
Yeah, but what does it mean they didn't have time on Friday? What is that? It means that it's referring to on Friday, like Hayalam Panai. It's not talking about food. They didn't have time. For some reason, Hashem didn't give the Torah on the Yom Shishi, on the 6th day of Sivan. He waited till the 7th day of Sivan. Anyway, it's a big topic in the tractate Shabbos, and it's discussed at length in the holiday of Shavuos. But fine, I'll try to bring it up, and we'll check into it. But in any event, what we are dealing with is not exactly the all the details of what happened, but more specifically the sacrifices that they brought. Did they bring a carbon shlamim? Yes, but they also brought carbon oilus, and so that's what our Gemara is really dealing with here. Beis Shammai doesn't seem to accept what Beis Hillel says, because they also brought oilus. So let's see what Beis Hillel answers. Before we hear what Beis Hillel answers, the Gemara says, what about the second reason of Beis Hillel? And the Gemara says that the Ka'amrit, Nelef, Minasiyim, this that you said we should learn from the Nasiyim, from the leaders of the tribes, that this that you said we should learn from the leaders of the tribes, that when they brought their sacrifices, what did they bring? Majority peace offerings, and only two, each tribe brought only two burnt offerings. That's something that was a one-time event. Done in Dover, Hanoig L'Dairais, you can logically deduce something that's applicable for generations. Midavar Hanoig L'Dairais, from something that is applicable, that is done for generations. The ain't done in Dover Hanoig L'Dairais, but we're not going to learn something that's applicable for generations. Midavar she'eino hanoig l'dairais, that is from something that is not applicable. This mean? What this means is that we have the sacrifices that we are dealing with, that is the carbon oilas re'iyah and carbon chagiga for the holidays. That's something that's applicable every year, 3 times a year. And we want to learn that from the Nisim, from the by the inauguration of the tabernacle. Well, that was a one-time thing. That was not something that was applicable for long term. That was a one-time event. We're not going to learn from that. So Beis Hillel, and what does Beis Hillel answer? Ma'ishna Chagiga, Ma'ishna Lifnei Hadibor. Why is Chagiga different? That you're claiming that it was also that Chagiga, that they brought peace offerings before Hashem gave the revelation at Sinai. Your source is because it says they brought shlamim. They brought these, the verse that I quoted, that they brought these peace offerings. This is our question on Beis Hillel. It says, but how could you miss that? It's so clear. It's even brought first. It even says it first. So how could they have missed out on that? It's very clear there was burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Gemara answers that Kosavri Beis Hillel oila shekri midbar oilas tamid havi. It does say that they brought this burnt offerings, but Beis Hillel says, yeah, but that's not an oilas re'iyah. That's not a burnt offering you bring when you come to the tabernacle, when you come to the temple for the holidays. That was the daily sacrifice that we read about every single day in our karbanos, and was brought when the temple was around. They would constantly bring carbon oilas, which was also called a carbon tamid. It was a burnt offering, and that sacrifice is what it's referring to. It's a oilas tamid, and that sacrifice has nothing to do with an oilas re'iyah. Beis Shammai Savri, Beis Shammai says no. Beis Shammai says Oila she'ekriva Yisrael b'midbar oilas re'iyah havi. Beis Shammai says it was an oilas re'iyah. It was that the oilas that we talk about there is the oila, is the burnt offering. And what is the source? So if you look in Rashi, Rashi says because they saw Hashem. So when you come to be seen and see Hashem, you're supposed to bring an oilas, you're supposed to bring a carbon. Don't see my empty-handed. And so the way Beis Shammai understands it is that's connected to seeing Hashem coming to the Mishkan and or coming to the I mean, there wasn't a Mishkan there, but coming to the place where Hashem is going to have his revelation at Sinai. There was some type of there was a revelation. They saw Hashem, so that was a source that they need to bring a carbon oilas re'iyah. So that's how Beis Shammai heard. Shammai, Rebbe Elazar, Yishmael, that Beis Shammai, Rebbe Elazar, and Rebbe Yishmael, all these three, Kulu Sfira Lahu, they all hold Yisrael Bamidbar, Oilas Re'iyah Hav, that the oila in the was an oilas re'iyah.
Sounds like an opportunity.
So this was a oilas re'iyah, according to all these three opinions. Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yisrael, Lili, Kulasfir Lahu, oilas she'ekriva b'midbar. There are three others that say that it wasn't an oilas. The oilas would bring every day. And Beis Shammai, so Beis Shammai, we already know. We know that Beis Shammai obviously holds what was the carbon. Oilas re'iyah should be double.
You're breaking up on us. You're breaking up on me.
Okay. Use my phone.
Me too.
How long has this been going on?
A little bit.
A few minutes.
Oh, boy.
Recording in progress.
Okay, let me just delete this.
Now we can't hear you.
He's
You're
changing
muted.
over. He's changing over.
Okay, but he's muted. That's
Can you hear me now?
sure.
Okay, so this is good. This is clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just do one thing here. Okay, so the Gemara here says that Abaye says that Beis Shammai, Rebbe Elazar, and Rebbe Yishmael, they all hold Beis Shammai, Rebbe Elazar, or Rebbe Eliezer, according to some say that it should be Rebbe Eliezer, and Rebbe Yishmael, all of them hold that the sacrifice that they brought in the desert is a oilas re'iyah. It was a sacrifice of seeing Hashem, and this burnt offering was the burnt offering special for seeing Hashem or being seen by Hashem. In Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yisrael, Lili, the other rabbis, they hold that it wasn't a oilas re'iyah, it was an oilas tamid. So we have, it's not an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel only. It seems to be each of them have the other rabbis as well that follow their that are going along with and agree with them. So it's a whole group of rabbis. Each of them have their group that holds their way. Now, Beis Shammai Hadi Amaron. Beis Shammai is the one who we just explained that he obviously holds that it was a oilas re'iyah. Why? How do we know that Beis Shammai holds it was an oilas re'iyah? Because Beis Shammai wanted to argue on Beis Hillel, and they are arguing on Beis Hillel, and they're claiming that we don't find that right before the giving of the Torah, that there was a case of korban chagiga without a korban re'iyah. We don't find such a thing. That's what they're claiming to base on. Beis Hillel claim. Yes?
Okay, I know this is sort of an unusual question, but in Har Sinai, the Avodah Zorah that was, obviously it was Avodah Zorah, but the giving, the golden calf, wasn't that a form of a korban? I mean, it was the beginning of it, actually. Even though it was Avodah Zorah, wouldn't that be considered a form of a sacrifice?
You know what? You lost me there. What are you asking?
No, I'm trying to find out whether or not when Aharon was participating in the golden calf, was that a form of sacrifice?
When Aaron was bringing the golden calf,
because they were when it was, they were donating gold and everything to build it. Everybody was forced to give gold. The women were supposed to give their gold and everything. Was that a form of a peace sacrifice, or was that an actual burning? I mean, because it was obviously there was fire used to burn the gold, and then of course
I don't know if you would call that a sacrifice. Interesting. There was a donation.
On a very primordial level, but it was still, it was Avodah Zorah, but it was leading into the actual.
Anyway, that happened after this.
The Torah was given.
Okay, that happened later. So I don't know if it's so applicable what you're.
I was just trying to see if there was.
Okay, fine. So in any event, so going back to our Gemara, so our Gemara here tells us we have Beis Shammai's view, and Beis Shammai says that the same way you find that they brought Shlamim there, they brought Oilas Re'iyah there. So you can't say that you see a case where we have Chagiga without Oilas Re'iyah. We don't find such a thing. Now in Rabbi Yishmael, how do we know that Rabbi Yishmael follows this line of thought? Rabbi Yishmael the tiny, because we have a brisa. Rabbi Yishmael, it's very interesting that Rabbi Yishmael here tells us about how the Torah was actually given, and the two opinions about this, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael says that the Klolos Nemru B'Sinai, the general principles of the Torah were given on Har Sinai, and they weren't really explained in detail. And after the tabernacle was built and they were explained, and so the general rules were given at Sinai. Upratas ba'ayel mayed, but the details were not given until later, the tent of meeting, which basically means after the Mishkan was built, and Moshe taught the Jewish people the laws. Now, so the pratas were at ayel mayed, and Hashem told Moshe from above the pareiches, from Me'al HaKaperes, the word came to Moshe. Hashem spoke to Moshe, and then Moshe taught it to Klal Yisrael. Now Rabbi Akiva says, Klalois upratus nemru b'Sinai. Rabbi Akiva holds that the klalois, the general rules, and the details were all given at Sinai. V'nishnu b'Oyel Mayed, and then they were repeated again in the Oyel Mayed, and and then they were repeated a third time when the Yidden were right at the edge of going to the Eretz, right at the edge of entering Eretz Yisrael. It's called Arvas Mayav, the plains of Mayav. That's where they were when Moshe passed away. So over there, Moshe explained the whole Torah. So there they were all repeated a third time. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So we have Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, but we're emphasizing the view of Rabbi Yishmael here. And we're saying that only the general rules were given at Sinai. The details were given later on. Now, the Isal Kedaitoch, and if you're going to think that Oila Shekrivu Yisrael Bamidbar, that the Oila, the burnt offering that the Yidden brought in the desert, Oilas Tamid Havi, that you want to call it an Oilas Tamid, it's a obligation for, if you want to say it's an Oilas Tamid that's going to be brought long term, the daily sacrifice, mi'ika midi, de me'ikaraloi by hefshet benituach, v'labsoif by hefshet benituach. The understanding is that Rabbi Yishmael must hold of this because it would be very surprising that the sacrifice changed from before the giving of the Torah, where we didn't have the details, so they would have brought this sacrifice as a Oilas Tamid, and then brought it again as an Oilas Tamid later on with all the rules. In other words, does it make sense that they would have had this mitzvah and done it if it didn't have the rules yet? So like they did it initially wrong or without the rules, and the Meikara didn't initially it did not need the way it's skinned and the way it's cut up into pieces. They didn't have those laws yet because according to Rabbi Yishmael, the details were not given yet. And are you going to say that in the end, when they were given, according to Rabbi Yishmael, they were given later, so they started doing things differently? Does that make sense? It must be that this was not a Oilas Tamid. This must have been just a Oilas Re'iyah, and they brought it